So there's this plateau you hit when you're scaling an expertise business, whether you're a coach, a consultant, you sell a service of some kind, your offer's working, you're signing great clients. Maybe you're not crushing it, but it's working, right? People are buying, you have momentum. And then gradually, or sometimes all at once, it just slows down or it just stops. The same offer, the same price, the same you, but the response changes. And instead of hearing, I'm in, let's go. How do we get started? You start hearing, let me think about it. I'll get back to you. Instead of people buying from the page, you start needing to get on long sales calls and, explain things and do a lot of convincing and persuading and following up. Instead of DMs that immediately led to sales, you start getting DMs that lead to more DMs and maybe even more silence. Um, and the natural response at this point is to start looking at what's changed, right? The ads must be off. The copy needs work. Maybe the market's saturated. Maybe you need to lower the price. Maybe you need a new funnel. Maybe you need to do another launch. And so you start fixing, right? You start rewriting things. You rewrite the sales page. You test new ad creative. You add more testimonials. You lower the price a little bit. Maybe some of it helps, but the core issue, this feeling that selling should be easier, that something fundamental isn't clicking, that doesn't go away. Because now you're in this loop of fixing things around the offer. And honestly, it's pretty exhausting because months later, you're basically in the same spot, but just more tired. I've seen this hundreds of times. And I want to show you exactly what's happening because I think once you see it, you'll know exactly why none of those things worked. And more importantly, what'll actually make the difference for you. So when you first start selling your offer, right, you were selling to people who already knew you on some level. Maybe these were people who've been following you on Instagram, on YouTube, people on your email list, people who watched your content for weeks or months, people in your DMs who've been having conversations with you, people who showed up to your lives, your workshops, your webinars, all those things. These people already trusted you. They have seen how you think. They've absorbed your philosophy to a certain extent. They've been in your world long enough that when you say, hey, I help people do X, they already know what that means because they watched you say those things and teach those things a bunch of times. They've felt your energy. They've seen your results. They've had this belief in you. They've had this relationship and trust with you well before the offer ever landed in front of them. So when you put the offer out, even if it was kind of vague, if it wasn't perfectly worded, they bought because the relationship was doing 70% of the work, right? The offer only needed to do 30%. It just needed to be clear enough. It just needed to give them a reason to say yes now instead of later. That's it. The trust was already there. Their desire was already there. The offer just needed to line up with their core problem and their core desire. So the part that most people don't realize is that sometimes when they are getting sales, things do seem to be working. They think that the offer is actually what's doing the heavy lifting. Chances are, unless you've actually done the work to really optimize your offer for cold traffic, it's generally not the offer that's doing the heavy lifting. It's not the offer that was working. It was good enough, but actually most of the work to get someone into a transaction with you was actually being done by the relationship. The offer was just a thing that the relationship was pointed at. Now, when people in this situation, they try to scale, they run ads to people who've never heard of them. If this is, you know that like when you do that, when you scale beyond a certain point, and for different people, depending on their audience, it happens at different revenue levels. For you, if you have a few hundred people on your email list or a few thousand, if you have a few thousand people on your social media, you might hit that at 15K a month, 20K a month, 30K a month. It's variable. But at some point, you are going to try and increase the amount of traffic that you're sending to your stuff. So your content is going to reach new audiences. Someone's going to share your stuff and a bunch of strangers land on your page. New people who don't have context, strangers basically, who don't know you, who haven't watched your stuff, they haven't felt your energy, they haven't built that trust, that familiarity, that relationship with you, when they start consuming your stuff, when they start seeing your offers, what you have to realize is that they're starting from absolute zero. As in, there's a zero base of context that they're operating from relative to you. Now, your offer has to do everything, not 30% of the work, but 100%. It has to create trust from scratch. It has to create relevance from scratch. It has to demonstrate that you actually know what you're talking about. It has to tap into a desire that they already have in their language, not yours. It has to show them why your approach is different from the 10 other people in their feed who are saying very similar things. And it has to paint the outcomes so specifically that they can actually picture their life on the other side in almost like a really visceral way. They can generate a clear mental image of what'll be different if they actually choose to work with you. And all of this has to happen in 30 seconds because that's how long a stranger is going to give you before they just keep moving. And if your offer wasn't built for that, and if you're experiencing this plateau, it probably wasn't. What you need to understand is that your offer was built for when the relationship was doing most of the work, right? And no one told you exactly what was happening. So you never thought you needed to optimize the offer to actually work for a complete stranger. And this is the moment where most people start blaming everything except the actual issue. The ads aren't working. Well, maybe the ads are fine, right? Maybe the offer isn't built for cold traffic or the copy isn't converting. Well, copy may be fine too. Sure, you may need to tweak some of the language, but it may be just sitting on top of a structure that can't carry the sale alone. Or the price is too high. Well, the price was fine when warm people were buying it, so the price may not be the variable that changed. The variable that changed is the relationship. You went from selling to people who knew you well, or at least knew you a little bit, to selling to people who don't. And the offer that works in a warm relationship actually becomes a liability to the sale when it's presented to a near stranger. So the big aha that I want you to have is to have a truly scalable business, you need an offer that's optimized for cold traffic. Here's why this is important, right? You're not going to hit escape velocity in your business until you have the ability to put a message in front of a stranger and with a high level of predictability, reliability, repeatability, lead a certain percentage of those strangers into a transaction, into a sale, and turn them into customers, turn them into clients. If you can't do that, the business will never truly feel like it's obviously hitting its full potential. It's going to be very hard to make the money you want to make. And more than anything, it's very hard to have the predictability and consistency in terms of your cash flow and the money that you are generating, because it's going to be very variable. There's going to be peaks and valleys. It's going to be very unpredictable and inconsistent. And the way we turn a volatile, unpredictable business into a very stable, healthy, predictable one that just grows month over month is by creating this dynamic where the messaging, the way we articulate the offer and all these things is optimized for strangers or near strangers. And then we utilize our ability to put a message in front of these strangers and convert a certain percentage of those people. So you need an offer that's optimized for cold traffic if you want a truly scalable business. And now that used to be enough, right? But here's where it gets really interesting, because you may have noticed that the market has changed. And in the current market dynamics, this is not just a scaling problem. So even your warm audience is getting harder to convert. Have you noticed that? The people who've been following you for a while, who've consumed your stuff, who you would think would be the easiest people to enroll and sell, even those people are slower to buy than they used to be. And that's because the market itself is maturing. Everyone's sick of getting pitched to. Everyone's been burned. Everyone has bought the stuff that didn't deliver. They've hired the people who overpromised. They've invested in programs that were mostly fluff. So trust as a whole is lower across the board and way lower than even 2 years ago. And skepticism, which used to be the exception, it's actually the default now. So even people who you have a relationship with on some level, even if it's a parasocial relationship, they've just been following you from afar, it's not enough to compensate for an offer that's not optimized. And the bar for what an offer needs to do, as in how clear it needs to be, how specifically it needs to speak to someone, how much certainty it needs to create, it's gone way up. And most offers haven't evolved with the market. And that's why, the experts who were doing 20, 30, 40K months a year ago, they're doing 10, 15, 20K months now. It's the same audience, same content, the same offer. If anything, they've put more stuff out. What's changed is that, well, the whole world around that offer has changed, but the offer didn't keep pace. So how do you actually fix this? And how do you actually scale your business and create a steady flow of new clients without spending all your time doing marketing and sales? I don't know about you, but that's not how I want to operate in my business. I like most of my business to be about the stuff that I'm doing to help people, not actually promoting and, creating content and doing all this stuff. So I want to tell you what most people get wrong here first, because this is important, and then I'll tell you what you need to do instead. So most people, when they hear like, hey, your offer needs to do more work, and what they translate that to mean is that I need to make the offer bigger. I need to make it more valuable. I need to add more stuff to it, more modules, more bonuses, more calls, more features, more details on the page, a longer sales page. I have to get into the nuance and give a more comprehensive description of the methodology. And I get it, because you want to convey how unique and distinct you are relative to everyone else. But that's actually the worst thing you can do, because every single thing you add to your offer is one more thing that your prospect's brain has to process. Now, the more that your prospects are a stranger to you and your world and your stuff, the less time and bandwidth and attention they reserve to actually go from first encountering your stuff to then establishing the 3 R's, right? The 3 R's are relevance, resonance, and relationship. So relevance is like, hey, is this for me? Is this relevant to me, right? Is this relevant to my current problems and my current desires? Resonance is this person for me? Do I resonate with them, right? Do I like their vibe? Do I like their values? Do I like, their approach? And then relationship is, do I want to be in relationship with them? Both transactional way, but also just in terms of following them. Is this someone I trust? Do I feel that they're real? Do I feel their integrity? Do I feel like they embody their stuff? All of this is happening, right, in this very, very, very tiny window. And when there's too much, right, their brains are overloaded. And prospect brains, under a lot of load, they don't buy. They actually just defer the decision. They say, let me think about it, and then they disappear. Back in the day when I was advising venture-backed SaaS companies, I used to have like sales teams of hundreds of salespeople. And the pattern that we always used to see is that the enemy of the sale was generally not a competitor. The enemy of the sale was actually what we call no decision, right? For most people, your biggest competition is not your competition. Your biggest competition is your ideal prospect, the person who you can help, and that they would get massive value from your stuff. The enemy, the competition, is that they're just going to defer the decision. It's just going to go in the not now bucket. It's going to go in the nice to have bucket. And, it's such a shame, because they have a lot to gain from working with you. You have a lot to gain from them working with you. And when they defer the decision, not only are you leaving money on the table, but you're also leaving impact on the table. So I'll give you an example. Think about how you buy champagne. So you're standing in the aisle, right? If you're the average person, you don't know anything about champagne. You're at a store, you can't taste it before you buy it. So how do you determine which bottle to reach for? Generally, it's going to be the label. It's going to be the things on the outside, right? The weight of the bottle, the name, the one line on the back, the design. It's not going to be the complexity of the blend. It's not going to be, the history of the winemaker and the 7 generations that have been, growing grapes. It's not going to be the terroir of the vineyard. It's going to be the packaging. Your offer, just like that, is the label on the bottle. Your expertise, your methodology, your depth, your decades of mastery, that's the champagne inside. And the champagne might be exceptional. Your stuff, I'm sure, is amazing. I'm sure you get results. I'm sure you've helped a lot of people. But if the label doesn't make someone reach for it in 3 seconds, the champagne doesn't matter. Not because the champagne inside isn't good, could be absolutely out of this world, but because the prospect never gets to taste it, right? You have a very short window to establish interest in a prospect's mind. So the move is not to make the offer bigger and more valuable, because that's just making it more overwhelming. It's actually to make it clearer, simpler, often smaller, more vivid, so that a stranger, someone who has zero relationship with you, can look at it for 30 seconds and something in their brain goes, oh, that's exactly what I need. This person gets it. This is different from all the other stuff I've tried. I can see exactly what I'd get. And the risk feels tiny compared to the upside. And then they step forward a little bit. And that could be replying to a DM, could be clicking a button on a sales page. It could be saying, yes, I'm in. How do we get started? But you have to realize that they have a lot of boxes to check in 30 seconds. And the offers that actually pass this test, they don't feel complicated. They feel obvious. In fact, of course, they'd say yes to this. Of course, because there's almost nothing to think about because the decision makes itself. And that's actually what I mean by the psychology of offers that sell themselves, even to strangers who have no context for you. They're not necessarily selling harder, and they're not using tricks. Like, I'm really not a fan of this whole culture of using NLP and all these tricks and a fancy sales script and all these copywriting techniques to get someone to buy from you. It's just all that stuff is manipulation, and all that stuff becomes unnecessary when you actually address the fundamentals. When you actually structure your offer in a way where the psychological forces inside the offer are all aligned. They're all pulling in the same direction. Trust, desire, differentiation, certainty, simplicity. When that's all aligned, the offer doesn't need you to carry it. It carries itself, and often it carries your business. And if you have any aspirations of building a high 6, high 7-figure business, then you have to understand that this is the most high leverage thing you can do, because unless you make your offer optimized for cold traffic, unless you really dial your offer in so it's psychologically compelling, it's always going to feel like a leaky bucket. You will spend a lot of time, energy, money trying to send more people to your stuff, but most of those people are leaking out. So I'll give you a real example. So one of the coaches I work with, he's been doing fine selling to his network, right? 10, 15, 20K months, good results, solid reputation. I think he has like 10, 15K followers on Instagram. But when he tried to reach people who didn't know him, things started stalling, right? Same offer, just a different result. And he was confused. We looked at his offer, and what I realized was the classic expert problem. It was dense, full of his methodology, full of nuance, which is perfect for someone who already understands his stuff, who's in his world. But to a stranger, it kind of read like a textbook. Their brain was just like, oh, wow, this sounds great, but I don't know what I'm buying. It's not really clear. And it goes in the nice to have bucket or a not now bucket. And so we didn't actually change what he delivers, right? We didn't change his program. We didn't change 99% of the stuff. We just changed the tiny 1%, which is how the offer communicates. We simplified the promise down to something that a stranger can picture almost immediately in 2 seconds. We made the outcomes concrete instead of abstract. We named the specific problems that his people are already feeling right now in their words, not in his expert language. And we showed why his approach is structurally different from the stuff they've already tried before, because that's another thing we need to answer. And these are just a few small tweaks. It's not a big rewrite. It's not a huge restructure. And what happened is that the response to his offers dramatically improved. Product didn't get better, right? That didn't actually change, but the packaging actually started doing its job. So if you're sitting here right now going like, shit, I think my offer has this issue, it's actually great news because it means that the issue isn't you, right? It's not your expertise. It's not your methodology. You don't need to go and get a bunch more trainings. It's not that the market doesn't want what you have. It means that the way your genius is being packaged is making it hard for people to see what's inside. And the reason why it's hard is probably because you care way too much. You want people to appreciate the full depth of what you do. So you show it all up front, right? And that depth, the same depth that makes your work exceptional, is the thing that's overwhelming people that you're actually trying to reach. So the fix to this isn't becoming less deep. It's just putting a simpler, clearer label on something that's actually quite profound. It's earning the right to show the depth by making the entry point so obvious that saying yes requires zero heavy lifting and it carries zero risk. So the depth actually unfolds once they buy from you, once they're inside your stuff, inside your container, because that's what actually turns a buyer into a raving fan and a referral machine. So there's a specific set of psychological forces inside each offer that determine whether all of this happens or not. And I put a training together called the conversion code that maps all of them. In 2 hours, you can identify the 1 or 2 tweaks you need to make. The link's in the description if you're curious. But even without that, here's the question that I'll leave you with that'll tell you everything you need to know about your offer. If a stranger, someone who's never heard of you, someone who's never seen your content, someone who has zero context on you, they looked at your offer for 30 seconds, could they picture exactly what their life looks like on the other side? That's the Polaroid test, right? Can they generate a mental image? Not what your methodology is, not what's included, not how many calls or modules or all those things. Can they picture their life after the problem is solved? And then do they see the specific problems and symptoms of those problems that they experience daily clearly spelled out, right? Is there a visceral sense of recognition and being seen? Is it immediately obvious how your approach is the big red easy button to get what they want? Do you use the exact words that signal to them why they must work with you specifically, over all the other people in your industry who offer the same outcome? The answer is no to any of these. That's actually the gap. And it's almost certainly a smaller fix than you realize. You may actually be just 1 or 2 tweaks away from an offer that sells like crazy to people who you would actually love to serve without the pushing, chasing, and convincing. And just know that optimizing your offer for cold traffic and honestly continuing to optimize, like this is one of those things where it's an infinite game. You can keep doing this to basically generate a higher ROI from every unit of time, energy, attention you put into your business. It's the highest impact thing that you will ever do in your business. So I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.